Okay, I thought I'd do something different. So let's talk about the sex industry, right? I know it's sex workers and so on and so forth, and the sex industry in South Africa. So I can give you just my take on it. Let me just zoom my face in. I think it'll be better. So there's a lot of girls that work in the industry. Some of them work at strip clubs, some work at them at like sensual massage parlors, some places that are known as spas. There's quite a few of them all around different venues around Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban. So basically you're paying money to someone for sex, okay? I presume in South Africa it's illegal because a lot of people tend to make a lot of money from it, especially who open up venues as well, restaurants or like clubs and places where women sell themselves for money. Or if you're in a I think it's biodiversity one, where it says like the LGBT community one. There's obviously males, females, transgenders. They also tend to sell themselves within the industry. A lot of people disappear, which is one of the saddest things. A lot of people get murdered, get drugged, get taken advantage of, had their vehicles stolen. I've heard a lot of stories that have happened, I suppose, through my exposure over the years. As I was a driver for one of I should say I was a driver for some of the girls that are working in the industry. So I did help a few of them. Some of them get involved into it because they have a lot of debt to pay. They get involved in drugs and alcohol. They just make money at the end of the day, just to provide for their families and everything else like that. And the police turned a blind eye to it, so they do get paid off by the owners. I'm sure a few politicians and police people are involved in these sort of syndicates, as well as areas in which women are being sold, men, children, the sex slavery, the sex trafficking. Like what we saw now, there was an incident at a club called Zanzo. So that's a club, and these people were tortured. So imagine what happens in these different places. I can name quite a few of them, like it could be anything really. So we have like Teasers, The Grand, Chivalry. I'm gonna check out the other places, like probably Heaven on Earth. There's Elysium Spa, which is called The Crib now. There's so many different venues. There's a lot of venues. There's in Cape Town, there's Mavericks. In Durban, I'm not too sure what clubs down there. But a lot of people get drugged, a lot of people get raped, a lot of people get murdered, a lot of people disappear and they get exposed. So the industry is quite massive, it's huge. There's obviously the safe industry, which is the Sexpo. The Sexpo has been going on for many years. So it's obviously getting, like people that are very conservative, very scared to explore their sexual side. So they have that. They open that up and they open that place up. They tend to. So you get that part, which is exploring your sexual parts. You obviously use the different toys, you use your different oils, massages, scented candles, and everything else like that, which is the positive side of it. But then you get the dark side of the sex industry, the workers, and so on and so forth. So it's quite horrendous and atrocious. The conditions, like I know a lot of Thai girls come to South Africa through Thai people. And they get exploited because they have to work a contract off, or for girls fall into debt and they're basically enslaved to a place where they have to sell their souls, in a sense, for men, like old men, all different types of men. And some of these girls are very young. Some of them are like in their 16, 18, 25, 30 and onwards. So yeah, it's really, really, really sad to see, right? Because it's like pedophilia, then it's like, rape, murder, and so on and so forth, which is just crazy and insane. So unfortunately, that's the industry that is currently happening in South Africa. It's probably bigger around the world. In America, it's different. Like, you know, you get pornography and porn stars are celebrated, but you don't see really the dark side, the gritty stuff. You know, people disappearing, people dying of, you know, drug overdoses, people shot and killed for their money and their, you know, their like cell phones, their cars. People disappear. And there's in South Africa, we probably get the police officers coming to harass people who try to expose this, or I wouldn't be surprised if there's a target on, you know, some people who try to expose it, especially journalists, especially normal citizens who try to expose these different things, you know. If any of you have questions for me, I'm just gonna open up the chat here. So yeah, I've seen what, you know, the first hand of what a lot of girls go through, a lot of people go through, and it's horrendous. It's sickening. It's actually terrible. So obviously there needs to be a safe working environment for them. They don't need to be exploited. They don't need to be manipulated or coerced or groomed, or even, you know, being in that kind of environment. But a lot of them do get into it is because of, you know, financial gain and money at the end of the day. So it's understandable. It really is understandable, considering the fact that a lot of people get into it. That's because they need money at the end of the day. They don't really have much choices. Being in that kind of environment. So yeah. Sure. Many years ago, there's different websites that a lot of people make use of. You know, like Sex Trader, Red Velvet, ESA. I think it's called South African Escort South Africa. There's a few other ones. I just want to see. Let's have a look and see which ones are there. Let's see. Yeah, there's some massage places. There's like, places pretending to be like, you know, normal spas, but they exploit women for sex and money. And a lot of them live in horrendous conditions. A lot of them are threatened. A lot of them live in fear. A lot of them are drugged. A lot of them are killed. A lot of them are murdered. Killed, murdered, disappear. Then their families try to look for them. They can't find them. Let me just type in here. Let's just say Escorts South Africa, right? Yeah, so you got like Escorts South Africa, you got Red Velvet, you got Sex Trader, you got Shay, Escorts Network. Don't know what that one is. Woza Escorts. There is Zina.co.za, there's Midnight SA, Escort Face. So there's quite a bit of them. And yeah, you see the prostitution in South Africa. So prostitution in South Africa is illegal for both buying and selling sex, as well as related activities such as brothel keeping and pimping. However, it remains widespread. Law enforcement is poor, extremely poor. In 2013, the Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force estimated that there were between 121,000 and 670,000. So 167,000 prostitutes in South Africa. With HIV, child prostitution, called sex tourism, and human trafficking are problems in the country. They go through the legal, so there's also police violence, there's HIV. They should go through quite a lot of stuff, actually. So the Immorality Act of 1927 prohibits extramarital sex between Europeans and natives. Okay, this is going way back. Decriminalization. Decriminalization has been under active discussion since 2009. Currently in South Africa, the Law Commission has 4 proposals that were submitted to public discussion, ranging from criminalization to decriminalization. In the run-up to the 2010 World Cup, there were calls to decriminalize and regulate prostitutes when an estimated 40,000 prostitutes were expected to travel to South Africa for the tournament. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. In March 2012, the ANC Women's League came out in favor of decriminalization and stated that they will campaign for this to become an ANC policy. It is argued that decriminalization would challenge the stigma that surrounds sex workers. It would help secure their human rights and dignity and make it for safe working and living conditions. But these are violated constantly. If you decriminalize it, then it's going to get worse. Decriminalizing prostitution would limit the power the police have on sex workers, and it would stop the police or law enforcers from taking advantage of sex workers. Yeah, okay. Yeah, wouldn't be surprised. Like, the police officers are taking advantage of sex workers. Yeah, police enforcement is rigorous, and police taking and accepting bribes by the sex workers and their clients is commonplace. That is interesting. In April 2013, the Commissioner for Gender Equality also stated its support for decriminalization. They argued that current laws violate sections of the Constitution and that sex workers would be better protected if the law is changed. No, that is not the case. Then why are girls disappearing, children disappearing, and why are people getting kidnapped, raped, shot, killed, and murdered over money and sex and drugs and alcohol and all of those things? So Sex Workers Education and Advocacy Task Force is a group based in South Africa that has been working to decriminalize sex work and eventually legalize it. They also provide health services for sex workers since they can't access themselves elsewhere. They have launched different programs and bringing awareness to problems facing sex workers, such as sex work empowerment and enabling the environment. Say her name, advocacy and law reform. All right, but the thing in South Africa is it's a huge pandemic with regards to rape and murder. It's such a huge problem in this country. I'll read more stats about that. Human Rights Watch in its August 2019 report claimed that sex workers in South Africa face frequent arbitrary arrests and police profile. In order to avoid police harassment, workers are forced to work in dangerous areas. Out of the 46 female sex workers interviewed by the HRW, most of them have been raped by men, perpetrating to be clients, and also have been victims of robbery or serious violence, including being beaten, whipped, and stabbed. Leslie Gornholtz, Acting Deputy Executive Director for Program at the Human Rights Watch, said sex workers in South Africa face arrest, detention, harassment, and abuse from the police, as well as probably maybe the owners of the companies and all of these places, which also deters them from reporting rape or brutal attacks against them. In December 2022, the government published a draft bill that would legalize sex work. Wow. Okay. So we're going to talk about... Okay, let's talk about police violence. There are numerous allegations of members of the South African police committing acts of violence and abuse against sex workers. 70% of sex workers who approached the Women's Legal Center to report a violation said that they have been experienced police abuse in some form, including beating and rape. In an interview, one sex worker in Cape Town said, "The colored police officer grabbed me and my clothes came off. They even pepper sprayed me in the mouth and beat me. Sex workers are often afraid to report violence, police violence to the authorities." That is atrocious. Like, what the hell? Okay, 2010. There was fears of increased prostitution in connection with the 2010 Football World Cup. Some sources estimating that an extra 40,000 sex workers would enter South Africa for the competition. As a result, there were calls for prostitution to be legalized and regulated to help control AIDS and STDs and for the protection of sex workers. However, this generated considerable opposition and no changes were made to the laws. Despite the fears, there was little evidence of increased prostitution. Well, how they done that? HIV. Yeah, so we know HIV is a huge pandemic and epidemic in South Africa. South Africa has one of the world's largest HIV epidemics. A study by the SA National AIDS Council estimated that there was a 60% infection rate, although this varies from area to area. For example, Johannesburg is 72%, Durban 54%, and Cape Town 40%. The reluctance to use condoms has contributed significantly to the epidemic. However, condom distribution by the government and HIV communication programs have reduced the rate of new instances. Oh, there's child prostitution. Child prostitution is a problem in the country. Whilst there are no reliable figures available, it has been estimated that there are as many as 30,000 children involved in sex trafficking and sex industries. So South Africa has become one of the major destinations for underage sex tourism in Africa. What the hell? Okay. Cape Town, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, and Durban has become popular destinations for this. Criminals, gangs recruit children from poor rural areas and take them to larger cities for the commercial sexual exploitation. My God. Okay, sex trafficking. South Africa is a source, transit, and destination country for women and children subjected to sex trafficking. Local criminal gangs dominate children's sex trafficking, as well as other gangs control the sex industry from other countries. So they're talking about the Nigerians, there's Thai, there's Chinese, there's Russians and Bulgarians. Organized crime control trafficking in South and Cape Town. So it's quite a few international as well as local people getting involved into this. That is crazy. I did not believe that. I heard about it. So hundreds of women from Thailand, China, Brazil, Eastern Europe, and neighboring African countries are trafficked into South Africa and forced to work as prostitutes. South Africa is listed as Tier 2 watch list country by the U.S. Department of State's Office to Monitor and Combat Sex Trafficking in Persons. Wow, that is crazy. That is insane. That is quite a lot. I never even knew most of that. Yeah. So obviously in South Africa, it's called gender-based violence. So gender-based violence is a huge pandemic here as well. So a lot of women are gender-based. I suppose it's all over the world. It's just through South Africa, because since we're living in South Africa. So yeah, I was there, part of it, but yeah, we're getting into the gritty stuff of it. So there's a lot of gender-based violence. It's a serious problem in South Africa with some of the highest rates in the world. It includes rape, femicide, domestic abuse, and sexual intimidation. More than 1 in 3 women in South Africa have experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Between 25% and 40% of the women have experienced physical or sexual violence from an intimate partner. Many women also experience emotional or economic abuse from intimate partners. South Africa has the higher prevalence of gang rape. Wow. Perpetrators and victims. Men are most often the perpetrators of gender-based violence, but people of all genders perpetrate and experience it. Women and children are the most often the victims. Many cases of abuse are not reported to authorities. Victims may be reluctant to report abuse because they feel that the police officers are inadequately trained to deal with gender-based violence, which is true. The impact. Gender-based violence traps families in intergenerational trauma. Children who witness intimate partner violence may learn to normalize violence, lose their self-esteem, or adopt unhealthy coping mechanisms. Responses. The South African government has launched the 16 days of activism. It should be actually 365 days of activism against gender-based violence and femicide. Bills have been introduced to deal with domestic violence and regulations. Okay. So there needs to be just proper policing and proper governing. Yeah. So as my one friend told me here, that I actually was working as an escort. I also was a driver for them. So I saw the real, true darkness behind escorting in the the industry itself. So yeah. It's always good to talk about it. It needs to be brought to the attention of South Africans and people in general. So I know we have a lot of kidnappings in South Africa. We have a lot of people forcing ransoms. People get involved in sex trafficking and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of these venues and institutions that are still open that do exploit women. They do take advantage of them. They take a certain amount of money from them. They cause a lot of stress, anxiety, depression, suicide. They drug them up. They cause us PTSD and mental illnesses. So it's quite huge and it's quite massive. So yeah, so it is crazy. That's all I can say. It's absolutely insane and crazy. So if anything should happen to me, like God forbid, if anything should happen to me, if I get assassinated by a hitman or like some person who just kills me because I'm exposing this whole entire thing. But I'm sure there's a lot of journalists in South Africa who are doing the same thing, trying to protect the human rights of people in general, and they tend to talk a lot about it. So that's why like now recently there was a club called Zanzo that was exposed for torturing people. Like there was a video being leaked of them torturing people, and I wonder what other clubs do to the girls or to men, to women and children, and clients or people who go and see them. They probably get drugged and killed and their stuff stolen. So it's a huge thing. It's a huge, massive thing and a massive issue. So, so it is what it is, unfortunately. The government's not going to do anything. The police is not going to do anything. Maybe the local communities can get involved, but there's always a price to pay, and there's always someone willing to pay money to, hide the truth from what really is going on across the world. In America, it seems to be a normalized thing where you become a celebrity, a pornographic celebrity. It seems to be a lot of places around the world in Europe, but I think it's a huge pandemic across the world. I think it's a big issue, but it's also a bigger issue here because there's a lot of people's rights being violated every single day, and there's not enough being done to protect them. The police here is just atrocious, man. They're so useless. Like, I wouldn't be surprised about the stats about how many women and children are killed and murdered and everything else like that. So yeah, it is insane. It is crazy. So what can you do? So yeah, I know a lot of few people that work in the industry, a lot of people that left the industry, and I know a lot of people who are trying to just provide for their families, because a lot of people do it because of poverty. So a lot of things happen around the world. Some people come to South Africa for a better opportunity, but they get exploited. The majority of them just do it for their families, to provide, bread, food, medicine, just basic needs for their family. Because of the unemployment rate in this country, it's just ridiculous and insane. And then a lot of people come over because there's some rich business people from all over the world that come to South Africa to get escorts, to get, people working in the sex industry, the workers and everything else like that. So that's the negative part of it. Unfortunately, that's the harsh, dark reality of it. So if anything should ever happen to me, hypothetically speaking, if I get assassinated or killed because I've been exposing this, and I'm sure a lot of people have been exposing it for many years, over the years. So it is quite a huge problem in South Africa. At the end of the day, it is what it is, and these things shouldn't happen, but they do happen. There's a lot of atrocities happening around the world. So I'm going through each part of it, from my experience and what I've endured and how things have happened. I've known friends that have lost their loved ones. I have known people that I've associated with lost their children or lost their daughters or sons or their mothers and fathers to this whole entire thing. When you try to put a blame on someone and expose them, then they come full force and they attack people and they kill people. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people were either bribed, some people were executed, or trying to expose it and truly show the darkness of the sex industry, as well as escorting in South Africa and having a sex worker. So there's a lot of problems. There's the abuse that women get, the sex trafficking of children, the spreads of sexual diseases, AIDS, HIV and stuff like that. The police is not doing enough. They're probably getting money from the establishments or from the girls, so they're exploiting women. They're also beating women, they're hurting women. And I wouldn't be surprised if politicians are involved in this kind of syndicate or this industry that generates a lot of capital money. So That's why a lot of places have, they have bars, they have restaurants, they have places where you can get drugs, or some of them bring drugs into the establishment, or the owner is selling the drugs in their establishment, and it's just a decline. It's just insane and ridiculous. So yeah, so that's my take on it, and yeah, it is what it is. So I've read most of this information from Wikipedia. You can probably find it. Yeah, it's quite interesting to know and talk about it, and just generally have a conversation about it, which is quite unique and different at the end of the day. So yeah. Oh, there was a guy recently called with child pornography. It was a huge, massive amount of it, and there was a sting and operation. But see how many children. There was a lot of videos and pictures. I think there were local girls and boys. So how did this happen, and how did they let it happen? Like, I can't believe it. It's just ridiculous and insane. Like, it's probably happening all over South Africa, and all over a lot of people just looking to just, I don't know. We live in a perverted, twisted, profoundly sick society. That's what I can put it as. It's just obviously ridiculous and insane. So this conversation will probably be sensitive, and so yeah, I hope you learn from it. It's unfortunate that we have to go